Emily parked her car outside her parents' house, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. The familiar hum of her engine faded as she turned it off, but her anxiety only grew louder. She sat there for a moment, staring at the warmly lit windows, knowing what was waiting for her inside. Family dinners were always a mixed bag, sometimes pleasant, sometimes tolerable, but more often than not they left Emily feeling like an outsider in her own family. Tonight, she suspected, would be one of those nights. As she walked up the driveway, the sound of laughter spilled out from the house. Emily forced a smile as she stepped inside, and was immediately greeted by the smell of roasted chicken and her mother's signature garlic mashed potatoes. Her mom, ever the cheerful host, greeted her with a hug. "Emily, you're late. Everyone's already here," her mom said, pulling her into the kitchen. "I got stuck at work," Emily replied, brushing it off. Her mom nodded knowingly. "Well, go say hi. Carla's been asking about you." Emily suppressed a groan. Aunt Carla. Of course she had been asking. The woman seemed to have an endless supply of passive-aggressive questions about Emily's life choices. She braced herself as she walked into the dining room, where the rest of the family was gathered. Carla was sitting at the head of the table, as if she were the host, despite it being Emily's parents' house. Her meticulously styled hair and expensive jewelry gleamed under the chandelier. Next to her sat Melanie, the golden child, Carla's pride and joy. Melanie was scrolling through her phone, but quickly put it away when she saw Emily. "Emily, there you are," Carla exclaimed, her voice dripping with faux warmth. "We were just talking about how busy you must be. Always working, aren't you?" Emily smiled tightly. "Yeah, work's been keeping me on my toes." Carla leaned in slightly, her tone shifting to one of thinly veiled condescension. "You know, sweetie, it's important to find balance. Work is good, but family is what really matters." Emily nodded politely, biting back the urge to retort. Carla's idea of balance was more about appearances than substance. Emily knew she worked hard to keep her career afloat, especially after a rocky few years. But none of that seemed to matter in Carla's eyes. As dinner was served, the conversation quickly turned to Melanie. It always did. "So, Melanie just got back from her internship in New York," Carla announced, smiling proudly. "She was working with one of the top PR firms in the city. They said they've never had an intern as capable as her." "That's great, Melanie," Emily's mom said, genuinely impressed. "Thanks," Melanie replied with a modest shrug, though Emily could see the smirk tugging at the corners of her lip. Carla wasn't finished. "It's no surprise, really. She's always been so focused and disciplined. I've always said, if you work hard and make smart choices, success will follow." Emily knew that last comment was aimed at her. Carla had a knack for turning compliments from Melanie into subtle digs at Emily. "What about you, Emily?" Carla asked, tilting her head in mock curiosity. "Still at that marketing job?" "Yes," Emily replied, keeping her tone even. "I actually just finished a big project for a new client. It's been challenging but rewarding." Carla raised an eyebrow. "Oh, that's nice. Marketing must be so creative. Not exactly stable, though, is it? But I suppose it's better than nothing." Emily clenched her jaw but forced a smile. "It pays the bills." "Well, maybe one day you'll find something more substantial," Carla said with a sympathetic tone that made Emily's blood boil. As the evening wore on, Carla's comments became increasingly pointed. She asked why Emily wasn't dating anyone, suggested she should consider moving back home to save money, and even made an offhand remark about how some people just aren't cut out for big city life. Emily's parents, ever the peacekeepers, tried to steer the conversation to safer topics, but Carla always found a way to circle back to Melanie's accomplishments or Emily's perceived shortcomings. The final straw came when Carla said, "You know, Emily, I've always thought you had potential. It's just a shame you haven't found the right path yet. Maybe you could take a page out of Melanie's book. She's such a great example of what hard work and determination can achieve." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to scream, to tell Carla that she was working hard, that her life was her own and didn't need to be compared to Melanie's. But instead, she excused herself and went to the bathroom. Closing the door behind her, she leaned against the sink and took a deep breath. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, her face flushed with frustration. Why did Carla always have to tear her down? And why did the rest of the family let her? As she splashed cold water on her face, Emily resolved not to let Carla get to her. She would get through the evening, go home, and forget about it. But deep down, she knew she couldn't keep brushing it off. Something had to change. When she returned to the table, Carla was in the middle of recounting another of Melanie's achievements, and Emily tuned it out. She focused on her plate, counting down the minutes until she could leave. After dinner, as everyone moved to the living room for dessert, Carla cornered Emily once again. "You know, Emily," she said, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret, "I only say these things because I care. I want to see you succeed. You're such a smart girl. It's just about making the right choices." Emily forced another smile, feeling the familiar sting of Carla's words. "Thanks, Carla. I'll keep that in mind." As the evening finally came to an end and Emily said her goodbyes, she couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy that Carla's comments always left behind. But this time, there was something else. A flicker of determination. Driving home, Emily thought about the image of perfection that Carla had painted around Melanie. It seemed almost too perfect. And if there was one thing Emily had learned from her own struggles, it was that no one's life was as flawless as it seemed. She didn't know what she would find, but something told her that Melanie's pedestal wasn't as sturdy as Carla made it out to be. Emily couldn't stop thinking about the family dinner as she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment. Carla's words replayed in her mind like a broken record, each passive-aggressive comment burrowing deeper into her thoughts. No matter how hard Emily tried to brush it off, the sting of comparison and judgment lingered. Carla had always been critical, but her smugness about Melanie's so-called perfection had reached new heights. Emily rolled over and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. Out of curiosity, or maybe frustration, she opened Melanie's Instagram profile. It was the polished, curated version of her cousin's life that she had expected. Photos from fancy restaurants, perfectly lit selfies in designer clothes, and snaps of her standing in front of iconic New York landmarks. Every caption was either a motivational quote or a subtle brag about her accomplishments. But Emily couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it was all too perfect. She knew better than anyone how easy it was to create a facade on social media. She scrolled through Melanie's profile, her thumb moving almost automatically, until she noticed something strange. One of Melanie's recent posts, a group photo from a party, had a cryptic comment underneath it. "This is going to blow up in your face." The comment was from someone Emily didn't recognize, but it stood out like a red flag. Melanie had a reputation for being careful about her online image, so why would she leave a post like this up? Curious, Emily clicked on the commenter's profile, but it was private. Emily hesitated for a moment, then went back to Melanie's profile. She remembered hearing from one of her younger cousins that Melanie had a private Instagram account, a place where she posted things she didn't want her family or her mother to see. Emily had dismissed it as gossip at the time, but now she wasn't so sure. Determined to find out more, Emily sent a message to her younger cousin, Sarah, who had always been more plugged into family drama. "Hey, quick question," Emily typed. "Does Melanie have a private Instagram account?" The reply came almost instantly. "La yeah, it's called @melonfilter. Why?" Emily felt a rush of vindication. "No reason, just curious. Do you follow it?" "Yeah, but she doesn't post much. Mostly party pics and stuff she doesn't want Aunt Carla to see." "Why, what's going on?" Emily didn't reply. Instead, she searched for the account and found it easily. The profile picture was a blurry selfie of Melanie with a cocktail in hand, and the bio simply read, "The Real Me." It was private, of course, but Sarah followed it, and Sarah owed Emily a favor. "Can you screenshot her posts and send them to me?" Emily messaged Sarah. It took a bit of convincing, but eventually Sarah relented. "Okay, but don't tell her I sent you these. She'll kill me." The screenshots started coming in within minutes, and Emily's jaw dropped as she scrolled through them. This wasn't the Melanie her family knew, the overachieving, polished, picture-perfect daughter of Carla. The posts on @MelUnfiltered painted a very different story. There were photos of Melanie at wild parties, surrounded by empty bottles and people who looked far too drunk to stand. In one video, Melanie laughed hysterically as someone dared her to steal a bottle of wine from a liquor store. Another post showed her skipping work to go to a beach party, complete with the caption, "Adulting." But the most shocking posts were the ones that revealed her disdain for her own family. In one, she had posted a selfie from a family dinner, rolling her eyes at the camera with the caption, "Survived another round of Melanie is perfect speeches, kill me now." Another photo showed Carla hugging Melanie with the caption, "She has no idea I'm hungover AF right now, queen of faking it." Emily stared at her phone, stunned. The image of Melanie that Carla had been parading around for years was a complete lie. Melanie wasn't the perfect daughter, the hard-working prodigy that Carla made her out to be. She was just as flawed, if not more so, than anyone else in the family. Emily felt a mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to laugh at the irony of it all. Carla had spent so much time criticizing Emily and holding Melanie up as the gold standard, all while Melanie was leading a double life. But another part of her was angry. Angry at Carla for her constant judgment, angry at Melanie for her hypocrisy, and angry at herself for letting their words affect her for so long. For a moment, Emily considered just letting it go. The screenshots were enough to prove to herself that Carla's criticisms were baseless. She didn't need to confront anyone about it. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that Carla's behavior wasn't just annoying, it was toxic. And as long as Melanie's facade remained intact, Carla would keep using her as a weapon to tear down everyone else. Emily decided she wouldn't stay silent, but she also knew she had to be smart about how she handled this. She couldn't just blurt out everything at the next family gathering. If she was going to confront Carla and Melanie, she needed to do it in a way that left no room for denial. That night, Emily carefully saved the screenshots Sarah had sent her, along with a few additional ones she managed to gather from Melanie's other friends' public accounts. She didn't have a plan yet, but she knew one thing for certain. The days of Carla's smug superiority were numbered. As Emily put her phone down and turned off the lights, she felt a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't dreading the next family dinner. She was looking forward to it. The next family dinner arrived sooner than Emily anticipated. Her stomach churned with a mix of nerves and determination as she drove to her parents' house. She had spent the past week preparing for this moment, meticulously reviewing the screenshots and piecing together a plan for how she would confront Carla and Melanie. It wasn't just about proving a point. It was about standing up for herself, after years of being belittled and compared. As she stepped into the house, the usual warm smells of her mom's cooking greeted her, but they didn't ease the knot in her stomach. Emily plastered on a polite smile and walked into the dining room, where the family was already gathered. Carla, as usual, was seated at the head of the table, her voice carrying over the hum of conversation. Melanie sat beside her, scrolling through her phone with a smug expression that Emily now understood all too well. "Emily, there you are!" Carla exclaimed, her tone dripping with artificial warmth. "We were just talking about Melanie's big news. She's been offered a full-time position at that fabulous PR firm in New York. Isn't that wonderful?" Emily nodded, her smile tight. "Congratulations, Melanie. That's great news." Melanie looked up from her phone and gave a modest shrug. Thanks, it's not official yet, but they're pretty much begging me to take the job." Carla beamed with pride. "Of course they are. She's worked so hard for this, it's no surprise they see her value." Emily bit her tongue, resisting the urge to reply with the sarcastic comment sitting on the tip of her tongue. She took her seat and let the conversation continue, biding her time. Throughout dinner, Carla dominated the discussion as usual, regaling the table with tales of Melanie's accomplishments and doling out unsolicited advice to anyone who would listen. Emily's parents exchanged awkward glances, clearly uncomfortable with Carla's overbearing attitude, but unwilling to confront her. "Emily," Carla said suddenly, turning her attention to her niece, "how's work going? Still at that marketing job?" "Yes," Emily replied evenly. "It's going well. We just signed a major client, actually. It's been keeping me pretty busy." Carla tilted her head, her lips curving into a patronizing smile. "That's nice, dear. You know, I've always thought you had potential. It's just about finding the right opportunities. Like Melanie has. Hard work and focus pay off in the end." Emily took a deep breath. This was it. "Well, speaking of hard work," she began, her tone calm but firm, "I've been doing some research lately, and it's amazing what you can learn about people when you dig a little deep." Carla frowned, clearly puzzled by the sudden shift in conversation. "What do you mean?" Emily reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were the printed screenshots she had carefully organized. She placed the folder on the table and opened it, revealing the first image, a photo of Melanie at a wild party, surrounded by empty bottles and visibly intoxicated. The room fell silent. "Melanie," Emily said, her voice steady, "care to explain this?" Melanie's face went pale as she stared at the photo. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice rising. "That doesn't matter," Emily replied. "What matters is that it's real, and it's not the only one." She flipped to the next page, a screenshot of Melanie's private Instagram post, bragging about shoplifting. Carla's eyes widened in horror. "Melanie, what is this?" Carla asked, her voice trembling. "It's nothing," Melanie snapped. "Those posts are private. They're just jokes." "Jokes," Emily repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Skipping work, stealing, and partying until dawn are jokes? Because it looks to me like the perfect daughter you've been praising all these years is living a double life." Carla looked between Emily and Melanie, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. "This can't be true. Melanie would never—" "Oh, but it is true," Emily interrupted. She slid another screenshot across the table, this one showing Melanie's caption about faking it through a family dinner while hungover. "And she's not just hiding it from you, Carla. She's been mocking you behind your back." The air in the room was thick with tension. Melanie stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You had no right to dig into my private life," she shouted at Emily. "And you had no right to stand by while your mom tore me down every chance she got," Emily shot back. "I'm tired of being compared to someone who isn't even honest about who they are." Carla turned to Melanie, her voice trembling with anger. "Is this true? Have you been lying to me?" Melanie hesitated, her bravado crumbling under her mother's gaze. "It's not what it looks like," she mumbled. Carla's face hardened. "Then explain it to me, Melanie. Explain why there are photos of you stealing, skipping work, and drinking yourself silly when you're supposed to be building your career." "I don't have to explain anything," Melanie snapped, grabbing her phone and storming out of the room. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house. Carla sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable. For a moment, no one spoke. Emily's parents exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to break the silence. Finally, Carla turned to Emily. "Why did you do this?" she asked, her voice quiet but edged with anger. "Because I'm tired of being treated like I'm less than," Emily replied. "Every family dinner, every conversation, you've made it your mission to criticize me while holding Melanie up as some kind of perfect role model. But she's not perfect, Carla. None of us are. And maybe if you spent less time tearing others down, you'd see that." Carla didn't respond. She simply stared at the table, her hands trembling slightly. Emily stood, gathering her things. "I'm sorry if this hurt you, but you needed to hear it. We all did." With that, she walked out, leaving the stunned silence behind her. As she drove home, Emily felt a mixture of relief and unease. She had finally stood up for herself, but she knew the fallout from this confrontation would be significant. Still, she couldn't help but feel a small sense of victory. For the first time in years, she had taken control of the narrative, and she wasn't going to let Carla or Melanie dictate her worth ever again. The days following the explosive family dinner were eerily quiet. Emily half expected a barrage of phone calls from Carla or Melanie, but instead there was silence. Her parents checked in once, their voices tentative as they avoided picking sides. "We're just trying to keep the peace," her mother had said, but Emily could sense the tension in her words. Peace was the last thing the family had now. For the first time in years, Emily didn't feel weighed down by her family's judgment. She had spoken her truth and shattered the illusion of perfection that had suffocated her for so long. Still, the confrontation lingered in her mind. She wondered how Carla was coping with the realization that Melanie wasn't the golden child she had always believed her to be. A week later, Emily got her answer. It was a Friday evening when her phone buzzed with a text from Melanie. Emily stared at the screen, surprised. She hadn't heard from her cousin since the dinner. "Can we talk, please?" Emily hesitated. Part of her wanted to ignore the message. Melanie had always been dismissive of her, and Emily wasn't eager to reopen old wounds. But another part of her was curious. Melanie had stormed out of the dinner without defending herself, and Emily wondered if she was finally ready to face the consequences of her actions. "Okay," Emily replied. "Do you want to meet somewhere?" "Your place. I'll bring coffee." An hour later, Melanie showed up at Emily's apartment. She looked different. Her usual air of confidence was gone, replaced by a nervous energy. Her makeup was minimal, and her designer handbag hung limply at her side, as if it no longer mattered. "Thanks for letting me come over," Melanie said as Emily opened the door. Emily nodded and stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. The two of them sat on opposite ends of the couch, an awkward silence stretching between them. "So," Emily began, breaking the tension, "what do you want to talk about?" Melanie sighed, running a hand through her hair. I wanted to say I'm sorry." Emily blinked, caught off guard. She had expected defensiveness or even anger, but not this. "For what?" Emily asked, her tone cautious. "For everything," Melanie said, her voice trembling. "For letting Mom put you down all these years, for not standing up to her, for being, well..." Emily leaned back, crossing her arms. "Why now? You didn't seem sorry when you stormed out of dinner." Melanie looked down, fiddling with the lid of her coffee cup. "Because I was embarrassed." "You were right, okay? I've been living a double life, and I've been too scared to admit it. Mom's always expected me to be perfect, and I thought, if I could just keep up the image, she'd never have a reason to be disappointed in me." Emily softened slightly, though she kept her guard up. "And what about the rest of us? Did it ever occur to you how much it hurt to be constantly compared to you?" "I didn't think about it," Melanie admitted. "I was so focused on keeping Mom happy that I didn't care who got hurt in the process. I was selfish, and I'm sorry." Emily studied her cousin's face, searching for signs of insincerity, but all she saw was exhaustion. Melanie wasn't the polished, untouchable figure Emily had grown up resenting. She was just a young woman trying, and failing, to navigate the impossible expectations Carla had placed on her. "Does Carla know you're here?" Emily asked. Melanie shook her head. "She hasn't spoken to me much since dinner. I think she's processing. She didn't say it outright, but I could tell she's hurt. She always thought I was her success story, you know. Like I was proof that her way of parenting worked." Emily raised an eyebrow. "And what do you think?" Melanie hesitated, then said quietly, "I think she put too much pressure on me, and I let her." The two of them sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Melanie's confession hanging in the air. Emily felt a pang of sympathy for her cousin, despite everything. She had always envied Melanie's seemingly perfect life, but now she realized how much of it had been a facade. "So, what now?" Emily asked. Melanie looked up, her expression uncertain. "I don't know. I've been thinking about leaving New York, maybe starting over somewhere quieter, but I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of disappointing Mom even more," Melanie admitted. "And of failing. For real this time." Emily sighed. "Look, Melanie, none of us are perfect. You don't have to keep pretending to be. If Carla can't accept that, that's her problem, not yours." Melanie nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know how to tell her. She's built her whole identity around me being this perfect daughter. Maybe it's time she learned that being a parent isn't about living through your kid," Emily said. "It's about supporting them, flaws and all." Melanie let out a shaky laugh. "You sound like a therapist." Emily smiled faintly. "Maybe I missed my calling." For the first time in years, Emily felt a genuine connection with Melanie. The walls between them had crumbled, and she saw her cousin not as a rival or a symbol of her own inadequacy, but as a person, flawed, vulnerable, and trying to find her way. In the weeks that followed, the family dynamics began to shift. Melanie did leave New York, choosing to take a lower-profile job in a smaller city. She told Carla it was for her mental health, and while Carla didn't fully understand, she reluctantly agreed to support her daughter's decision. Carla, too, seemed to soften. She still had her moments of superiority, but she was quieter, less critical. Emily suspected the confrontation at dinner had forced her to reevaluate her priorities. As for Emily, she felt a newfound sense of confidence. She no longer dreaded family gatherings or Carla's passive-aggressive comments. She had faced her fears, spoken her truth, and come out stronger on the other side. At the next family dinner, Emily found herself sitting across from Melanie, who gave her a small, grateful smile. It was a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had forged, a bond built not on perfection, but on honesty. And for the first time in years, Emily felt like she truly belonged.